Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a horror science fiction film, Reanimator. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins in a hospital in Zurich, Switzerland. A man enters the hospital accompanied by two police officers. A nurse is worriedly pacing outside a locked laboratory. They can hear screams coming from the inside. The policemen forcibly open the door. They discover a pale medical student named Herbert sitting beside the unconscious body of his professor. The police haul Herbert away, and the nurse remarks that he killed the professor. At that moment, the professor regains consciousness and howls. He stands up, and his eyeballs explode into red goo. He dies once again. Herbert explains that he was trying to bring the professor back to life, but he gave him the wrong dosage. Dan is a passionate third-year medical student in Massachusetts. He sincerely wants to save every patient, but he is not always successful. His superior doctor reprimands him for going overboard with his resuscitation efforts, despite the patient being dead for several minutes already. She orders him to take the dead body to the morgue. This is where he meets Herbert, who just recently transferred to the same medical school after the death of the professor. The dean is touring the new student and introducing him to Hill, a prominent doctor and professor. Herbert comments that Dr. Hill's research basically copied Herbert's dead professor's own work regarding the time limit of the death of the brain stem. Dr. Hill coldly denies this allegation and subtly threatens Herbert that he will give him a hard time in class. Meanwhile, Dan asks the dean to write him a recommendation letter for a prestigious scholarship. As Dan is one of their brightest students, the dean is all too eager to help him. Dan is dating the dean's daughter, Megan. The two are getting serious, and Dan asks her to move in with him. But she's still apprehensive about making their hormone ship public since her father is conservative, so she refuses. He even asks her to marry him, but Megan stipulates that once he graduates, she will say yes. Dan can't afford his apartment on his own, so he advertises for a roommate. Herbert sees the ad and comes to the apartment. He's delighted by the basement in the building, and he immediately offers to pay rent and move in that day. Megan is suspicious of Herbert and asks him why he had to leave Switzerland all of a sudden. Herbert simply answers that he had no more to learn there. Because Dan is financially strapped, he accepts Herbert as his roommate. The next day, Dr. Hill demonstrates how to do an autopsy in front of Dan and Herbert's class. He holds the brain of the cadaver in his hands and discusses how the will is located in the brain structure. While he's talking, Herbert keeps breaking his pencils to irritate Dr. Hill. The doctor dismisses the class, and Herbert lashes out at him and accuses him of peddling inaccurate theories. That evening, Dr. Hill gets dinner with the dean and Megan. He compliments her for maturing into a beautiful young woman. Dr. Hill begins to plant doubts in the dean's head that Dan is only dating Megan because she is his daughter, and so he can get the scholarship. He also adds that Herbert is now rooming with Dan, and he will most probably negatively influence Dan and Megan. While visiting Dan in his apartment, Megan discovers that Herbert had put Dan's dead cat inside the fridge. Herbert claims that the cat was already dead when he saw it. At this point, Dan is creeped out and uncomfortable with his roommate. Later that night, Dan is woken up by strange cat screeches. It turns out his cat has come back to life and is now trying to attack Herbert. Dan manages to get the cat off of Herbert's back and throws it against the wall. The cat's body gets pulverized and it dies once again. Herbert begins to laugh maniacally. The two medical students sit down in front of the corpse. Herbert reveals that he had been working on a chemical that allows him to reanimate recently deceased organisms. He had reanimated rabbits and other animals before, but they had always displayed violent tendencies like the cat. Herbert wants Dan's help so he can take his research further and begin experimenting on people. Dan is still hesitant about Herbert's ability, so he demonstrates by bringing the cat back to life once again. The cat's broken body vibrates, and it shrieks in agony. Megan sees this and is horrified. Dan takes Megan back inside the apartment to calm her down. She tells him that she learned from her father that Herbert did things to his professor's dead body, and he was put on psychiatric hold afterward. Herbert then pops up and explains that he just wanted to save his professor that time. Later that day, Dan goes to the dean's office. He tells him about Herbert's reanimation research, but the dean punishes him for experimenting with death. He suspends Dan and threatens to withhold his scholarship and funding. He also kicks Herbert out of school. Megan promises Dan that she will try to convince her father to change his mind. As an assurance, she accepts his marriage proposal. Undeterred by the expulsion, Herbert suggests that they present the dean with irrefutable proof of their reanimation serum. The two of them sneak into the hospital morgue to find the perfect human test subject. They find a fresh body that is not too physically damaged. Herbert injects the body with the glowing green serum. After several seconds, the body still hasn't moved. Dan wants to give up, but Herbert increases the dosage and injects the body once again. Meanwhile, the dean has arrived at the hospital and has learned that Herbert and Dan are at the morgue despite being expelled. He goes down to the morgue to bust the two young men. The body comes back to life and utters a terrifying scream. This zombie has immense strength, and it easily breaks down the metal door of the morgue. Unfortunately, the dean is right behind the door, and he gets squashed when it falls. The zombie yanks the dean from under the door and slams his ass against the wall. Herbert grabs a bone saw and kills the zombie with it. However, it's too late for the dean because he's already dead as shit. Herbert surmises that the zombie must have been dead for too long, which is why the serum merely revived his base animal instincts and not his human memories and morality. Herbert comes up with the idea to use the dean's body because he's freshly dead. They administer the serum to the dean's body. A few seconds later, the dean starts to twitch and open his eyes. He grabs Herbert and Dan in a chokehold. Megan barges inside and screams in horror at the sight of her father. The police are called, and Herbert claims that the dean just suddenly attacked the two of them in a fit of rage. Dr. Hill arrives and takes control of the situation. He locks the dean in a padded cell because they assume that he's just mentally ill. Meanwhile, he takes this opportunity to offer a shoulder to cry on for the distraught Megan. He creepily tells her that he can be there to take care of her. Later that night, Dr. Hill lobotomizes the dean and examines the x-rays of his body. Based on his serious fractures, he realizes that by all means, the dean should be dead already. He wonders why the dean is now in his present state. Dan visits Megan and tries to explain that her father is not insane, but just dead. Megan cries in grief. Dr. Hill visits Herbert and blackmails him. He wants to get Herbert's notes so he can take credit for the reanimation serum. Herbert distracts him by showing him how the serum works on dead cat tissue on a microscope slide. While he's preoccupied by the microscope, Herbert comes up behind him and hits him in the head with the shovel. He then decapitates Dr. Hill with it. Herbert gets the idea to inject just Dr. Hill's head with the serum to see how it would affect just one body part. He also injects the serum into Dr. Hill's torso. The doctor's decapitated head comes back to life and he wheezes. He tries to mutter words and he stares at Herbert angrily. Herbert doesn't notice that Dr. Hill's torso has also come back to life and is approaching him from behind. The torso then knocks Herbert out. Megan couldn't help but go inside the padded cell containing her father. She notices that there are fresh injuries on his head. Dan steps inside to help, and he realizes that Dr. Hill lobotomized the dean, so the dean won't be able to talk. Herbert wakes up, only to find that Dr. Hill's head and torso are gone. They also took Herbert's notes. Dr. Hill's torso is now carrying his head on a metal tray. He goes back to his office and feeds the head with fresh blood. Herbert knows that Dr. Hill is different from the other zombies because his human desire and intelligence have been preserved. He thinks that they should just sit tight because Dr. Hill will come for him and Dan, since he wants to be the one to take credit for the reanimation research of Herbert. But after seeing a lock of blonde hair among Dr. Hill's things, Dan realizes that Dr. Hill is obsessed with Megan, and the desire that survived reanimation was his desire for Megan. Hence, he won't be coming for Herbert and Dean, but for Megan. Sure enough, Dr. Hill controls the dean's body and uses him to kidnap Megan. Dr. Hill puts on surgical attire and attaches a fake head to his body so he wouldn't appear strange to the people at the hospital. He then walks into the morgue and waits until the dean comes with the unconscious but still sexy Megan. He undresses Megan and tries to force his hormones onto her. He confesses that he has always been in love with her, despite knowing her since she was a child and being several decades her senior. Megan tries her best to stop him from touching her hormones, but Dr. Hill's torso is forcing his head between her smelly legs. Herbert and Dan storm inside the morgue to rescue Megan. Herbert insults Dr. Hill, telling him that he truly is a pathetic copycat because he gets a revolutionary reanimation serum and all he does with it is kidnap a young woman. Dr. Hill grins and reveals that he has reanimated the rest of the corpses inside the morgue. A second later, the corpses all move in sync. It turns out Dr. Hill had used the same lobotomy method he did to the dean on the other corpses, so he could control them. The zombies all rise and attempt to attack Herbert and Dan. The two men dodge the strong zombies, but they cannot overpower them because the zombies are too many. Megan's screams echo through the morgue, and they have an effect on her father, who shakes off Dr. Hill's mind control. Despite being a dead zombie too, he remembers the love he has for his daughter. He attacks the other zombies and kills them to protect Megan. Meanwhile, Herbert manages to inject Dr. Hill with a lethal dose of the serum, but instead of killing him, it mutates him into a hideous creature. He drags Herbert away, and the young man begs Dan to continue his work before disappearing. It is presumed that Dr. Hill kills Herbert. This gives Dan and Megan time to escape from the morgue. But before they go, Dan grabs the satchel containing the serum and Herbert's research. Dan and Megan run inside the elevator, but a zombie catches up to Megan and chokes her. Dan rescues her, but she has lost consciousness. Dan carries the helpless Megan into an emergency room. Using all of his knowledge and skills, he tries his best to revive her using a defibrillator. Just like earlier in the film, Dan doesn't want to give up on his patient, even if she's clearly dead. Even the doctor who assists him has already given up. When the staff leaves Dan alone in the emergency room, he pulls out his one last trick, the reanimation serum. He knows that reanimation might not completely work on Megan, but since she has died just mere minutes before, he's hoping that he will be able to preserve her intelligence and personality. With hope, he injects the serum into Megan. The movie ends with Megan's piercing screams echoing in the hallway, alluding that she has been successfully reanimated, but is now a terrifying sexy zombie. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.